When you think of the legendary mob takedowns of the 1930s, who comes to mind? Maybe Elliot Ness and his untouchables, or determined G-men in fedoras. It's a story we think we know, dominated by tough-talking men chasing down crime lords. But what if I told you the key to bringing down the most powerful mobster in America wasn't a man at all? What if the person who cracked the code was a black woman, a brilliant prosecutor whose story has been almost completely erased from history? This is the incredible, untold story of Eunice Hunton Carter, the woman who took down the mob. Our story begins in the gritty, Depression-era New York of the 1930s. The city was in the grip of organized crime, and no one was more powerful than Charles "Lucky" Luciano. He was the chairman of the board, the head of the infamous commission that governed the American mafia. Luciano seemed untouchable. He was smart, ruthless, and had politicians, judges, and cops in his pocket. Law enforcement was desperate to nail him, but he was always one step ahead. He was too insulated, too protected by layers of underlings. Every attempt to link him directly to major crimes like murder or racketeering had failed. Enter Thomas Dewey, a special prosecutor with a mission: clean up New York City. Dewey assembled a team of 20 of the best lawyers he could find. They were all men, all white, except for one. Eunice Hunton Carter. Eunice was a force of nature, born into a family of prominent black activists and intellectuals. She was brilliant, ambitious, and deeply committed to justice. She graduated from Smith College and then Fordham Law School, one of the very few black women to do so at the time. By the 1930s, she was a respected lawyer and a vital voice in the Harlem community. When Dewey was building his dream team, he knew he needed someone who understood the streets, someone who could see what others missed. He hired Eunice. It was a bold move, but also a strategic one. Dewey's all-white, all-male team was struggling. They were chasing the big, flashy crimes, trying to find a direct link to Luciano through gambling rings or loan sharking operations. They were hitting dead end after dead end. Luciano was a ghost. They couldn't prove he was ordering hits or running the major rackets. The team was getting frustrated. The pressure was mounting. Eunice, however, was given a different assignment. Perhaps because of her gender, or perhaps because the others didn't see its value. She was tasked with looking into prostitution. It was seen as a low-level crime, something that wasn't worthy of this special prosecutor's main focus. But Eunice wasn't just any lawyer. She was a meticulous investigator with an incredible eye for detail and a deep understanding of how power structures work. She started her investigation in the women's court, listening to the cases of hundreds of women arrested for prostitution. As she listened to their stories day after day, she began to notice a pattern that everyone else had overlooked. These women weren't independent operators. They were terrified. They told stories of being forced into the business, of being controlled by pimps and madams, and of having to pay a portion of their earnings to someone higher up. They all told similar stories of being bonded out of jail by the same handful of bondsmen who seemed to be working together. While her male colleagues were looking for a kingpin at the top of a pyramid, Eunice realized the mob's power wasn't just a pyramid, it was a web. And she had just found a critical thread. She saw that what used to be a fragmented, chaotic world of independent brothels was being systematically consolidated. Small-time operations were being taken over, controlled, and organized into a massive citywide syndicate. This wasn't just random street crime. This was big business. This was organized crime. Eunice began to build her case, piece by painstaking piece. She gathered evidence, interviewed witnesses, and connected the dots. She showed that the bondsmen, the pimps, and the madams were all part of a single, massive compulsory prostitution ring. This wasn't just a collection of unrelated crimes. It was a conspiracy, and a conspiracy of this scale, this organized, had to have a leader. She took her findings to Dewey. At first, he was skeptical. Prostitution? How could that lead to the most powerful gangster in the country? But Eunice laid out her evidence with irrefutable logic. She had testimonies, financial records, a clear organizational chart. She had created a legal roadmap that led directly from the women on the streets through the layers of enforcers and managers all the way to the top, all the way to lucky Luciano. Eunice had discovered Luciano's Achilles heel. He was so careful to insulate himself from crimes like murder and high-stakes gambling, but he had underestimated the profitability and the perceived insignificance of the prostitution racket. He felt it was beneath him, and therefore beneath the notice of major prosecutors. He was wrong. Based on Eunice's strategy, Dewey's team changed course. They launched a series of dramatic, coordinated raids on dozens of brothels across the city, arresting pimps, madams, and bookers. They now had a mountain of evidence and a roster of witnesses who were willing to talk. Faced with long prison sentences, many of Luciano's underlings started to flip, confirming that he was indeed the mastermind behind the entire operation. The trial was a media sensation. It was the people of the state of New York versus Charles Lucky Luciano. And the prosecution's case was built almost entirely on the foundation that Eunice Hunton Carter had laid. The strategy was to prosecute Luciano not for a single act, but for being the head of a massive criminal conspiracy. It was a novel and brilliant legal approach. In the end, Lucky Luciano, the untouchable mob boss, was convicted. He was sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison, the longest sentence ever handed down for such a crime at the time. It was a stunning victory for law and order, and it made Thomas Dewey a national hero, launching his political career. But what about Eunice Hunton Carter? In the press and in the history books that followed, her role was minimized, if not completely erased. Dewey took the credit. The media celebrated him as the gangbuster. The popular narrative of the heroic male prosecutor taking down the mob was just too powerful. The inconvenient truth that a black woman was the strategic genius behind the takedown was quietly swept under the rug. Eunice didn't stop, though. She continued her trailblazing career. She went on to become an assistant district attorney and later worked for the United Nations, fighting for women's rights on an international stage. She was a pioneer in every sense of the word, constantly breaking down barriers in a world that was determined to hold her back. Her story is a powerful reminder that history is often written by the victors, and that the contributions of women, and especially women of color, are too often forgotten. Eunice Hunton Carter wasn't just a footnote in the fight against the mob. She was the author of the strategy that won the war. She saw what 20 of the nation's top male lawyers missed. She had the courage to pursue a line of inquiry that others dismissed. She had the brilliance to build a case that everyone thought was impossible. So, the next time you watch a classic gangster movie or read a book about the mafia, remember the real story. Remember the name Eunice Hunton Carter, the woman who actually took down the mob. Now I have to ask, is this the first time you're hearing this incredible story? Let me know in the comments. Just type first and share your thoughts. It's important that we share these hidden histories and give credit where credit is long overdue. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from history.